Yo, what's up, folks? Just wanted to chime in a bit on this Brittney Griner scenario. And one of the reasons why I'm chiming in on it today is because I've been listening to a lot of media out of the U.S., social media. Black Americans, particularly, have a lot to say about Brittney Griner being arrested. Not only Black Americans, but it has something to do with Black Americans, LGBT, a lot of different groups, but Black Americans this time are I find particularly interesting. I do, because a lot of times we rely on what people are telling us generally about the world to be accurate without reading anyone's experiences or going into other Black people's experiences that have documented them across the world. And so even another Black person can tell us something about the outside world, outside of America, and we often would believe it because maybe we share a certain political view with that individual or something. But the reality is that Brittney Griner pleaded guilty to being to transporting weed, vape or whatever, some weed, medicinal weed inside of her vape cartridge or whatever, right? It's a new form of medicinal weed that people have access to, that people get access to in the US and in other countries. By the way, medicinal marijuana is not an American thing. It's not an ethnic American thing. It's just a technology thing. It's something that in certain parts of the world, people have said, weed is not, we got enough studies to know that weed is not really what we're chasing around like alcohol. They rather use the resources on other things. And so, and then they also found out that the health effects of weed are, they're obligated to give people the best health care they can get. Even a basketball player, or even a teacher, or even the president of the United States, or, a director of a company, a chief of a police department, right? You're talking about vaping, and the reality is that goes on. But the blanket, I saw a Black brother who's very popular. He leans towards Trump often because there's this new dynamic where some Black people want to kind of lean towards another party just to put pressure on the main party, right? It doesn't always work. I'm for putting pressure on anybody at any time, not only Democrats, but all people, all political parties. And I'm for making no exceptions for any of them at any time, any group of people, also myself. That's my version of equality. But I I would say just look. The reality of it is that if you want to know what countries allow you, what countries have weed vape or medicinal marijuana laws versus countries that don't, if you want to know what the amounts they consider you can have on you privately without it being a crime or not, you actually need to do some research. Don't rely on what someone just tells you, because it's not a blanket thing. It doesn't exist across the world that way. It's very specific. If you want to know how Russia deals with vape, look into Russian laws. If you want to compare that to, let's say, Amsterdam, the laws are different. It's not the same as Germany. It's not the same as Denmark. It's not the same as a lot of countries. By the way, it's not just an EU thing. There's countries that just don't want to be using taxpayer money to lock up visitors or non-citizens for long amounts of time because the taxpayers end up paying for it. But also something called bilateral agreements. Different countries have specific agreements with each other about these specific types of things. And so some countries will have a bilateral agreement that says, I deal with this and your citizens the exact same way you will deal with my citizens and I deal with my citizens on this law. I don't think you got bilateral relations between the U.S. and Denmark, by the way, or U.S. and Russia. By the way, a lot of countries have bilateral agreements with the United States of America, meaning with certain things, they have agreed to treat each other exactly the same. This is not what's going on with the U.S. and Russia. Homegirl basically is a average black American, not the brightest, not the oldest, not the most intellectual, not the most educated. However, she's a professional basketball player, and that's what you have to take her as. It doesn't mean she's smarter than you. It doesn't mean she's dumber than you. It just means you can't expect much more than she plays basketball well. Well, this person traveled to another country, did what they normally do on any day of the week, and that turned out to be illegal. She usually courts take your plea into consideration, and she pleaded innocent in front of a Russian court. She didn't go out there and say, "Hey, I'm American, fuck Russia, I can do whatever I want to do." No, she put herself at the mercy of the Russian court, and she found out how much mercy the Russian court has for black American citizens like her, or American citizens like her specifically. So that's just something people like Brittney Griner have to walk away with and keep into account. Now, me, I'm a black American. I don't live in the United States of America. I live in Europe. I live in Denmark. Does Denmark run around doing that kind of shit? No, they don't. Are the weed laws a little different than the United States of America? Yeah, but it's not so extreme either. It's definitely not extreme at all. In some cases, it's less extreme. Some cases, it's a little different. In Washington, D.C., weed is basically legal. Well, in Denmark, it's not. But that doesn't mean they go around prosecuting people for it the same either. They don't lock you up like they're looking for a drug dealer, right? When you're a beer drinker, they don't want to know if you had a beer 2 days ago before you went to work. It's also the same in Denmark. They don't necessarily want to know all of that. They just want to make sure you're not doing it while you drive. You're not doing it, this kind of shit. Well, the reality of it is that we got an idea of how Russia treats maybe not its own citizens. You don't know. Black Americans can talk a lot. They think they're experts about racism in America, but they need to understand that they have a privilege a lot of people don't have. It's called data. The United Nations called for that. The U.S. government said, yeah, we're going to produce data on black Americans because we know racism is real. Russia does not do that. Russia does not acknowledge anti-black racism. You're not going to find it. You're not going to find data on black people in Russia. You don't know how many black people live in Russia that look like you, Kojo, or me, or any of us. The darker hue, the lighter hue. You don't know because Russia doesn't supply their citizens or the world with that data like places like the United States does. Ironically enough, Denmark doesn't supply that data on black people either. So if you want to know how black people are treated in Russia, if you knew, I would suspect you went there and did some research yourself, or you're just talking shit and you don't really know and you're up for mediocrity instead of being up for what other intelligent people are up for, and that is resource and information gathering. Now, so I just wanted to say that if you're black American and you want to know how you're going to get treated, don't think you're going to be treated the same in every country, but don't think you're going to be treated bad in every country either. A lot of countries like black Americans don't have shit against black Americans. A lot of countries are going to see you as, aha, you're American, we cool with you. We know what that is. A lot of countries are going to say, hey, you black American, we know what you are. We know who you are. We cool with you too. Another country might say, hey, you're African. You're African like us. You cool too. They might not treat Russians the same way. They might say, hey, we got a Russian here one day. An African country might say, we got a Russian. These Russians commit a lot of crimes in our countries. We holding this person over this vape pipe. Then you might find other countries that don't. What I'm saying is you got to get into the details to know, because those details exist in reality and you live by them. So on that note, I wish homegirl's sister gets out. I do find that she's been treated fucked up, but if Russians normally get treated that way, then hey, so be it. I'm not used to being treated that way in the United States. I've been the witness of a lot of fucked up practices. Not all bad, not all good. A lot of good, but there's bad too. Really bad. But the last thing I wanted to say is that if you don't have data, if the country of Russia doesn't want to produce data and has chose not to produce data about black people and other groups of people, so the world can't criticize them if they have no data, what I would say is, if you're black, just ask another black person that's been to Russia or met another black person that's been to Russia. Ask them. That's qualified. That's not quantitative data. Russia don't want you to know about that quantitatively, but you might ask. And black Americans, we have a long history of traveling to Russia, old and new. And most of them that I found will tell you flat off the bat, make no mistake about it, you're going to encounter anti-black racism in Russia. Just because it's not written off and about, just because you can't find the data, do not make that mistake at all to believe it's not there. You will be horribly shocked. Now, anybody that's going to Russia typically, or any country in the world, money always helps you. Kind of strange how money ain't helped this lady this time. Sounds very political. And if you were Joe Schmo off the street with no money, they might not even wait. If you were from Ibukabaka, Kikalaka land, they probably wouldn't even give a shit. To be honest, there's people walking around in Russia with no documentation about who they are. You see, just because they rather have people there being undocumented than to give them asylum even on paper. You see what I'm saying? So there's a lot to this. Don't just believe what you read in the newspaper. Don't ever do that. And I would never tell anyone to ever just believe. Research. However, don't think that the U.S. government is just lying. Don't be phobic either, because you're going to find out there's governments out there in the world that lie a whole lot more on the regular. Just because you had it bad, I'll give you an example. Just because you black in America don't mean being black in some other country ain't worse. Just because you LGBT in America don't mean being LGBT in another country ain't worse. Don't mean it can't be better either. But we're talking about Russia now. Where's your data? What qualitative data are you going on? Or are you just going on what you heard or you think or you feel because of some other problem you got or some other bias you have about history? Nah, be detailed orientated. Don't settle for mediocrity when making choices and on information, okay? Be detailed orientated and seek the information, and you will get the answers there. If I'm going to expect to find most brotherly love, just because of being an African American or maybe having some history about slavery, the place I would expect it the most would be in Africa. The most. But intelligent, educated people should be aware of the transatlantic slave trade in the Western world. Okay? All countries in the Western world should have some knowledge of that. All countries in the Western world should have knowledge of each other's human and civil rights story. I know about British human and civil rights. I know shit about Europe, human and civil rights. The Inquisition, that's part of Western history. It didn't just happen in America. It happened in Europe too. It happened in Europe first. They brought it to America. You see what I'm saying? So don't just think. Don't use these bullshit comparisons. Get into the details. Especially, you might find the details helpful because that might make your choices about your specific life even better than the last person's. So on that, I hope sister gets out. She made a mistake. Next time when you go to Russia, pack your bag like you're going to the most racist town in the U.S. Or pack your bags like you're going to the most Naziest town in Europe. Or pack your bags like you're going to the most homophobic place on earth. Pack your bags like that. You see what I'm saying? Pack your identity like that. Be careful, because your identity may not be welcome. You might get a hostile treatment. Don't assume, but be clever. And there's plenty of resources from black people out here in the world. If you're wondering why Russia ain't got a bunch of black people out there talking about how great Russia is, if you wonder why there's not a lot of information out there from black people written about talking about how socially great and just how justice just works great in Russia. If you're wondering why you don't find loads of it,